So I've been wanting to do a little rant. I happened to go to a homeschool co-op event with my daughter because we are members. It's a once a week thing. It's been a very pleasant experience, but I haven't. I'm not really linked in with these people. I don't know these people very well. They're just people from around here, um, rural Louisiana, basically. And they're my kind of people, to be very clear. These are the kinds of people that I came from. I know these people. I know where they stand. I know their sentiments on different things, and I like these people. So what I saw really annoyed me, um, upset me in a special way because I have sympathies with these people. What I saw was a Veterans Day event, and I learned that they had for the high school students in this co-op a special class that they called military history. Now, this class has been meeting for a few months, right? It's now November, but it only meets once a week. Now, as a teacher, I know that if you only have like an hour once a week for a few months, that is not very much time to impart any information. But they had taken the time in this military history class, strange class, strange name for a class. They had taken an awful lot of time in that class to train these students to perform a ritual in front of the whole assembly. So they wheeled out these students. They had a group of elderly veterans there on the stage, and these students proceeded to fold an American flag, and they had a spokesman for this class, a member of the class, on a microphone to explain what folding the flag meant while the rest of the students folded it. So they had spent many of their class periods. They had spent a significant number of their class periods learning how to fold the flag and learning what they said the flag folding meant. So the flag folding, they proceeded to do. They would fold it one way and they would say, "This is for the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And then they folded it another way and they would say, "This is for the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost." And they said, "This fold is for the sanctity of motherhood, for which our soldiers fight." And they had another fold that was something pious about fatherhood. And by the end of this flag folding ritual, the leader of the co-op, who is this dynamic homeschool mom, I know the sort, she was in tears up in front of everyone. And she was wringing her hands saying, "People just don't know about this. People just don't know that this is what the flag means and this is what folding the flag means. And we have to tell our kids, we have to redouble our efforts and let people know. Because if we don't, we're going to lose this." And I was sitting in the back with my daughter and I was thinking, this is unbelievably sad. Of course, it's terrible cringe, but it's also incredibly sad. And it made me think of the resources that the Methodist Church put into trying to support the 18th Amendment, trying to support prohibition, right? They put their religious reputation, they put their clout, they put incredible effort and money into trying to insist that America meant something abstract that's not even particularly Christian, right? Prohibition. Christians can't prohibit alcohol. The Methodists had to change their canon law to allow for unfermented grape juice to be used in their sacrament, right? That this is really ridiculous. That they put so much of their effort and resources, and then they lost it all with the repeal of prohibition. So this was misplaced effort, especially of a religious institution. It was misplaced effort. And I would say, well, the Methodist Church just lost an incredible amount of clout by doing that. It was a bad bet, and they lost it. They suffered for it. They lost social position and respect, um, even by their own members, by that misallocation of resources. So I'm looking at these people and I'm thinking, what sort of cope is this to say that folding the American flag means these things? I suppose you can say that folding the American flag means whatever you want it to mean. But one thing is certain. Officially, it cannot mean what they said it meant. No one in the Pentagon would vouch for that. And if anyone in the Pentagon did say that folding the flag symbolized the Trinity in some way, the the Department of Defense would be immediately sued. Anyone who's paying attention knows that to be true. The separation of church and state may not be in the Constitution, but it's certainly the law of the land. And who says that the Pentagon will officially recognize that the soldiers fight for the sanctity of womanhood? That's ridiculous. They don't believe that there are such things as women. So this is preposterous, and the the conservatives that put this thing together and evidently put so much effort into this presentation have the wool pulled completely over their eyes. They are chanting to themselves comforting mantras and making great efforts to blind themselves and their own allies to the nature of the government they live under. That's what it boils down to. And I feel sorry for them because I want them to be better than they are. Because I like them, I want to see them prosper. I want to see them healthy. I think they still have a chance to to have a place in the future of America. They are having children, for heaven's sake. Most people don't believe in that anymore, so far as I can tell. So they do have that working in their favor, but what are they telling their children to believe? They're making extraordinary efforts to to plead with their children to believe absurdities about their own government, about the symbols of that government. Now, I like flags and I like symbols, but we should be realistic about these things. These are human institutions, they're fallible. We should not conflate them with religious dogma. And if we do conflate them with religious dogma, when the secular symbol fails, when the secular symbol is dissolved, will the people that have conflated that with eternal principles or religious teachings, will they cease to believe in those religious teachings? I've said before, and I don't mind saying it again. I went to Liberty University for my undergrad, and I went during the War on Terror. So I was there when George Bush was reelected, for instance. It's a day I remember very well. When George Bush was reelected, we were having a chapel service. And if you remember that particular election, there was some dispute about the votes in Ohio, and John Kerry had filed some kind of lawsuit about counting the votes in Ohio, and we thought that it was going to be another Florida situation or something. But then the morning of the next day after the election, those suits were withdrawn or dismissed, or I don't quite remember what happened. but I remember distinctly Jerry Falwell was on stage, and Jerry Falwell got a message. Someone rushed up to him with a message, and he announced it on the PA during the chapel service. And the rest of the chapel service was God Bless America and Battle Hymn of the Republic. And I'm glad to be an American because at least I know I'm free. And I remember that a friend of mine and I were extremely upset that morning. Neither of us, for different reasons. I was not a leftist then. I've never been a leftist. And I did not want John Kerry to win, but I certainly didn't want George Bush to win. John Kerry would have been some kind of repudiation to the war in Iraq. And I was upset that morning, and my friend was too. And I was particularly upset about how the victory of the Republicans turned into a pseudo-religious rally behind the flag. A chapel service turned into a political service, very obviously. And I thought then, as I do now, those were misplaced resources. And the Christian right in America lost a lot of clout by backing people like George Bush. Now, I know that Americans have a really hard time even remembering recent history or having any sort of thoughtful recollection of what has taken place even in their own lives. And that's one of the reasons why I emphasize with my students when I'm teaching them geography, for instance, which I was just doing, or when I'm teaching or touching on recent historical events. I like to remind my students about the record of their own government in recent history. And I'm not reminding them to bring down the institutions of our government, though personally I think they deserve to be delegitimized rhetorically. We should not feel any sentimental stickiness concerning these institutions. We should not serve the Pentagon, for instance. We should not go into foreign service. Just to jump through the hoops means that we must assent to serve principles antagonistic to our values and be, to sign up to be the people that travel around the world threatening various countries constantly on behalf of the homosexual agenda or something. No, none of us want to be a part of that. I certainly don't want to be any part of that. And we should not feel sentimental loyalty to these institutions that are so subversive to human health and happiness, not to mention the sovereignty of other states. But Americans need to know what their government does. Americans need to know what their government stands for. And I've always been of the special opinion that Americans need to exercise some responsibility for what their government has done abroad by demanding that they stop these destructive policies. So this is one of the reasons why I've been telling my students for many years now that the United States government went to Iraq in 2003 under false pretenses, and they accomplished in Iraq the instigation of a civil war which killed 1 million Iraqis and destroyed what was left of Christianity in Mesopotamia. Christians should care about that. Christians should care about that because whatever differences we might have with the Assyrian Catholics, for instance, or the Nestorians or something, these are people that confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. And we ought to care that they were completely destroyed and driven out of their own homeland, that Iraq is full of churches and monasteries that have been abandoned and destroyed. And there are even these disgusting videos of American soldiers raiding ancient monasteries and knocking the walls over. That's part of the American legacy in that part of the world. 1 million innocent people that did not need to die. Now, of course, they're all taking sides in a civil war that Americans knew nothing about, and they were all killing each other in disgusting, vindictive, barbaric ways, and expressing, I suppose, the values of that part of the world in the process. But none of it had anything to do with Americans. And Americans ought to feel indignant that those things were done under their flag and in their name. Now, going back to the situation, going back to the circumstance, I saw a group of old veterans, old men, and I saw a group of young people folding a flag and spewing pious nonsense about the flag, saying that the American military exists to defend the sanctity of womanhood, saying that the American military exists to protect the Christian religion in particular, and in the name of Christ, protect the Christian religion. The people saying this were deliberately blinding themselves. They're actively ignoring what their own government, what their own official leadership tells them that their institutions are doing and tells them what their institutions are for. If they were to listen to these leaders, if they were to listen to members of the Biden administration, they would know that the military exists to enforce abstract ideals of equity, to rename institutions and places named after their own ancestors, their own military record in this land, to deliberately and officially forget them, in fact, and to do things like change the gender of anyone who signs up, and to sponsor fornication and sodomy in the ranks. None of this corresponds to what these people proclaimed to be true. And they spent so much effort trying to get these kids to learn this, to learn these obvious falsehoods of the state of affairs, what these institutions do, what these institutions stand for. And the military goes around the world demanding that all other countries do the same. That's the truth of it. If we think about Hillary Clinton's record as Secretary of State, for instance, where she flew homosexual activists to Moscow, didn't she fly Lady Gaga to Moscow for a gay rights event? That's what our Foreign Service stands for. That's what Foggy Bottom stands for. That's what the Pentagon stands for. That's what they countenance. That's what they sponsor. That's what they say. And conservatives, like the sweet people that run my daughter's co-op, conservatives are worse than useless when they ignore these things, when they cover their ears and their eyes and sing, "I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free," like they did in front of the flag with all the veterans staring on. At least I know I'm free. Yeah, we don't have jobs that we can use to support families anymore. Our industry has all been exported to China so that the capitalists can save some dollars and issue more dividends on Wall Street or something. Our children are being indoctrinated to change their gender. Gay marriage has been sanctioned in spite of all the state governments that passed constitutional amendments to define marriage traditionally. Our young people can't get married anymore. They don't know how to relate to each other anymore. The U.S. military goes around the world threatening different countries, killing innocent people, instigating wars, getting involved in everyone's civil war. Why can't anyone have a civil war without us getting involved? But at least I know I'm free. To say that is to reveal that one is not paying attention, or that one is just given in to apathy. At least you know you're free. Your kids can't get married or afford a house, but at least you know you're free. I used to think about that song back when it was popular, back when people were singing it to support the Iraq war somehow. I don't even, I don't quite know what they thought they were doing. We're fighting them over there, so we don't have to fight them over here, or some such thing. It annoyed me then, and it annoys me now. And it's an abdication of thinking. At least I know I'm free. They sing it like a hymn, because it's something that demands faith, doesn't it? This is misplaced. It's so much effort that's horribly invested. And someday when those kids grow up and see what these institutions and what the official leadership sponsors, and they see that there is a gross disparity between that and what they were told these things represented, they are going to be religiously disillusioned and maybe even disillusioned with their parents that made such an effort to get them to believe what's absurd and untrue. So we need to be realistic. We've got to be realistic. The truth of the situation is dark. We need to appreciate at what point in history we find ourselves watching these events. We need to know what time it is. We need to know what these institutions stand for. We need to know how far gone this stuff is. And we need to adjust our loyalties accordingly. There are things that stick around that are worth our loyalties. There are institutions that come and go. There are symbols that come and go. We cannot set our hearts on those things that pass away, those things we're watching pass away, lest we lose our faith. That is the thing that ought to endure any political circumstance, any collapse, any embarrassment. That is why we cannot blend the cross with the flag. Perhaps I've seen way too much of that in my adult life, and so I feel very passionately about the situation, but it's worth reflection. Finally, to end this on a more upbeat note, it is fully right and just for regular people to want their government to be worthy of their support. It is right and just for people to look to their government to be a leader, to reward righteousness and to punish wickedness. It is right and just for us to look to the leaders of our political society and see them embodying social and religious virtues. We should want that. We should encourage that. All of the incentives are against it. All of the incentives now are against it, which is why people of outstanding virtue do not go into politics. Even at the best of time, the democratic political system should be repulsive to those sorts of people. But that's another matter for another time, I suppose. But it's right that healthy people should want to see those things in high places in their country. I like to point something out to people when I am giving tours in the colonial city in New Orleans, down in the French Quarter. I point to the design of the colonial city. Right in the center of things, we do not put a capital where elected legislators will meet and decide what is good or evil. They will write laws and such. And they'll proclaim, like Satan, "Evil be thou my good." It's not a capital, it's not an assembly, an elected assembly that we put in the middle of things in colonial Louisiana. It's the cathedral that's in the middle of things. And the cathedral is the symbol of the authority of God. And then to the right-hand side of the cathedral is the presbytere, which is the home of the bishop, right? So it's the seat of the bishop's authority. It's the bishop's palace. And then to the left-hand side is the cabildo, which was the office of the royal governor. And so we see in just the model of the colonial city, the monarchies that it represented, both Spain and France, both shared this symbolic orientation that ultimately it was wholly revealed law that is ultimately in charge here, that the institutions have a divine mandate, not a popular one. And then to the right and to the left, we see the servants of the king, the royal governor and the bishop, who are symbolically serving God. That is symbolically what healthy people desire. These people at the co-op, that's what they want to see. They want to see public leaders who are serving institutions with divine mandate. This is why they're coping so hard talking about the symbolism of folding the flag. This is why they're closing their eyes at what they would see as sacrilege, but they are themselves performing sacrilege with a flag. And it's pitiful.